Hey folks, welcome back to Money and Politics. It's Thursday, December the 9th. And today we're going to be doing little bit of a different show, a little bit more reporting here. Because yesterday, as we tape this, the U.S. House of Representatives Financial Services Committee had a hearing on that lasted about 4.5 hours on cryptocurrencies and stable coins. And what are they? I haven't been historically a huge fan of Maxine Waters, who's the chairman of that committee. But I will say, give credit where credit's due. I'll give her credit for calling this hearing and holding it. And as I listened to a number of the questions being asked, I thought they were pretty smart questions being asked. So it was kind of, I think, an impressive day for those who are serving on that committee. Now, they're going to be more informed on financial matters, which is why they're on that committee, to keep in context. Before I forget, I will put a link to the 4.5 hours of hearings if you want to listen to it. Or skim through whatever. There's no way that I can do justice to 4.5 hours. So what I'm going to do is kind of touch base on a couple of the items, major points that, were there. And if you want to send me an email, whatever, you can do that. So let's get started, because first thing before I do that, we had an interesting day. Let me just bring this up real quick. Kind of an interesting day on Humble with it shooting up. You look at that in the middle of the day. Then went back down. Then at the very end came up. So we were up about 6%. The volume was decent, 5.3, almost 5.4 million, which is pretty much in line with the 10-day average. So we are now at 47 cents. It wasn't, the other day we got down at one point to 39 cents, I think, was the low at one point. So we're going to have to put up with a lot of volatility. But as we are going to see as we go into this committee hearing, it's not just that Humble is a penny stock out there and the only ones dealing with cryptocurrency. As I said to you online, I remember saying people in Nashville when we were talking, that even, and I'm not saying Humble's a mediocre company, but even a mediocre company, if you get enough of a financial wave of a major transition, as it was when we went to the internet, that even a mediocre company can do well. So when we look at the 47 cents now, as of today, price, the ability of this company's price to move dramatically over the 3 to 5 year period that I've often said you need to be holding it, is clearly there. And so you really got to, throw out all this, so much of this mindset that we had from so many of the critics over the last year. In fact, yesterday, now that I think about, was my 1-year anniversary for buying my first share of Humble. But, over the last year, you got to throw out so much of the critics, because they were, thinking that we're going to make them millionaires in a couple of weeks. And then when that didn't happen, they hung around to say this isn't going to work. So I'm going to play the first bite here, which is from the committee hearing, which runs, it's kind of long, but there's 2 different parts to it. So it's 2 minutes and 36 seconds long. In the beginning, we have one of the witnesses, I didn't bother putting their names up, but we have one of the witnesses describing the merits of the digital revolution, financial digital revolution, and then we get a little bit into some of the regulatory landscape. So let's go ahead and play that. This, as I say, runs about 2 minutes and 36 seconds.
You don't need to have a bank account. You don't need to, in fact, rely on any intermediary. So somebody who's an immigrant and wants to send a remittance to a family member in another country is able to do that. And there's ways to do it with both crypto and to do it with stablecoin. And all you need to do is download a wallet, and then you can send it to somebody else anywhere in the world. And so this is a really powerful tool for democratization of access, especially for those who have difficulty getting bank accounts. There's no minimum fees, there's no minimum balances, there's no check cashing fees that are part of this technology. And you can do it in some cases for a penny or less.
And how much quicker?
Well, this is an important point. Blockchains, part of the beauty of them is that they're operating 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So it can be sent just about instantaneously. There's no multi-day lags that you have right now. And that change in the speed is just crucial because usually it's these lags that really are very costly.
I'm going to interject. Mr. Brooks, I have a question about the challenge of enforcing laws in a world of decentralization, whether it be law enforcement relating to financial crimes or SEC disclosure. How exactly do you enforce the law when there is no central entity against which to enforce the law? How do we grapple with that challenge?
That is a great question, Mr. Torres. I really appreciate you asking it. So I'd say a couple things about it. First of all, to the extent that some of the activity we're talking about is parallel to activity that happens in the supervised system, my question is, why don't we allow it in the supervised system? Again, you've heard me say it before this morning, but you have on this panel a big stablecoin issuer who's applied for a bank charter. Doesn't look like they're going to get it. Easiest way to supervise that would be to let them in the banking system and have the OCC have authority over them. So I'd start with that. The second point is lots of these decentralization protocols are designed to solve the exact problems that create the need for enforcement in the first place, because most enforcement in the securities and banking system is about some combination of human error, human negligence, human greed, or human bias. And the point of some of these decentralized systems is to take that out and have an open source piece of software everybody can look at and do with those things algorithmically. So as an example, I used to sit on a bank credit committee. We would decide who got credit and who didn't. And I think we had a really good system for it, but we were human beings. We might have been indulging in implicit bias. We might have made mistakes. Algorithms don't do that. So some of the need for what you're talking about goes away in a decentralized system.
So there was a couple of themes that went back and forth, and there was some overlap between the questioning from one member to the next. But one of the themes, and we hear some of that here, that what are the problems with our current system of transactions, of currencies? And you heard some of that, and you're going to hear some of that again about how there are biases. There's maybe political biases. There could be societal biases, where bankers make decisions on lending money and different things. There could be national security problems that exist. And since World War II, certainly, the United States dollar has been the world's reserve currency. It's, the basis of money is, of course, having an established value proposition for doing transactions, if you break it down. So you want to have a stable currency. So a lot of the questioning got to be about how do we maintain the United States from our standpoint, from a strategic standpoint, as the world's reserve currency, and then plus, as far as somewhat, how do you maintain the value? Some of these questions were not raised. Every one of these members on the House committee, the bad thing about being in Congress is you're given 5 minutes, which is nowhere near enough time. You just begin to scratch the surface and your time is up. So I myself could have probably asked questions for 2 hours. And maybe that would be, in fact, I'm going to see if I can get a hold of some of these individuals to do that so we can pursue this a bit more. The next bite here runs about 1:12. Mr. Congressman Torres of New York, Brooklyn area. Sharp guy. I had never really heard of him. He's only 33 years old, but he has some very good questions. Let's take a listen.
One of my concerns about crypto is that it would present a challenge to the supremacy of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. But what I have found striking is that the leading stablecoin issuers have actually chosen to peg their stablecoins to the dollar, which strikes me as a vote of confidence that reinforces rather than challenges the status of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. So what are your thoughts on the relationship between the dollar and the crypto? Is it as contradictory as many have feared, or could it be actually complementary?
I'll answer that. I actually don't think that it's contradictory at all. What people want is a U.S. dollar bank account. Everywhere in the world, people want to be able to have U.S. dollars. And actually, that's the hardest thing to get. And crypto is a tool for a lot of different things, including bringing communities together. But what people want in order for their everyday spending, it's dollars. If you're in Argentina, you want dollars. If you're somebody anywhere in the world, you want to have access to dollars. And that's the hardest thing to get access to right now. And that's why tokenized dollars is so valuable, because you don't need to have a bank account, yet you can have access to the dollar-based system. And a very, very important tool for inclusion.
So again, folks, you can't really do justice to a 4.5-hour committee hearing by just playing a couple of bites, and I don't want to play 10 bites, so I picked 3 to give you somewhat the flavor of it. The committees, and again, I used to be with C-SPAN, so this kind of brings me back to what I used to be doing during those days. It is the committee hearings where you really get the best information, not on the floor, especially in the House. The House is way too regulated. In the Senate, you can actually have some open debate, but in the House, typically the people speaking only speak for 1 minute at a time, each member, and they already have their mind made up on whatever it is they're talking about. Here in committee, they don't have their mind made up. It's information gathering. So as we heard in that last bite, we're talking about this, having the world be the world, or the United States being still the reserve currency, and we're hearing about, backing that up. Is there a government guarantee that would be on some of these stable coins, and why it's in the national interest of the United States to be moving to this currency, because otherwise we risk losing the edge as some other players on the world stage would maybe become the dominant player in the crypto market. Here we go.
We're at a really interesting moment in time. We're seeing this infrastructure layer, these blockchains, proliferate globally at incredible speed. It seems likely to us that the ability to access and interact with these blockchain networks will reach billions of users over the next 2 to 3 years. And the question is, in that time frame, will the United States support the dollar and digital dollars in the form of stablecoins, because they're in the market and operational today, to help the United States dollar be the competitive currency of the internet? I think that's the opportunity. I think it's in front of us right now. And it's one of the reasons why we're so focused on this as a national economic, and not just a national economic priority, a national security priority, because clearly, if this is the new infrastructure, economic infrastructure of the internet, we want the dollar to play a critical and strategic role. And partnering closely with private companies and using open internet technologies becomes a way for the United States to compete versus states that are seeking to nationalize that infrastructure, operate it themselves in a surveillance-oriented model.
So again, a 4.5-hour committee hearing. I'll put a link in the description, so if you want to look at it, you can. You can watch the whole thing or just peruse it and kind of pull some of your own bites to get an idea. One of the things I would say is this raises an awareness, number one, of some of the issues that all of us have to deal with. And there are a lot of issues out there probably that you haven't thought about. It also goes to show how, and this is an important point, how Congress is beginning to wrap its head around this. And that's an important thing. Aside from what was specifically discussed, the fact that this hearing is being held is important. It's, again, it's facing what's coming at us. And there are many times in the past, one can go through the history of Congress where there was a significant hearing, and it becomes significant as we look back from a historical context, where the military back in the 30s, there were hearings where the military was warning about a Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, and this is back in the 30s, long before it happened, and other things like that, where a lot of people in the American public at the time were not paying attention to what's going on in Congress. People today don't. But I'm saying to you, the humble nation, and the people that watch my channel, Money and Politics Now, you are in the top percentage of being aware of this movement. And hopefully you get well paid for it by investing in the right items. So it's not going to be just humble. It's going to be a variety of things, from stable coins and things I probably haven't even heard of. But this is a big movement, and all of us need to kind of have an idea of what it's going to do, to the extent that we can educate ourselves. So I wanted to bring this to you, and as I say, not to spend too much more time. You got an idea of some of the bites. I know that Brian did some tweeting today, and I will address that in time. But because this was just held yesterday and I didn't get a chance to bring it to you, I wanted to bring that to you now and make sure that you were aware of it so you could watch it. Maybe you can watch some of it over the coming weekend or whatever. Break it up into parts and listen to maybe half an hour at a time or something if you want. Anyhow, folks, that's it for now. I'll leave that. I hope you all had a good night, and we will continue to try to cover the breaking news that you need to know, or whether it's breaking or not, the significant issues, I should say, of this major transition that's going to be happening over the next 3 to 5 years. Let me just repeat in closing what I said. Now, as you listen to this stuff, you can hear how it is complex, how it is evolving, how we're now before Congress. This is not going to be the only time. I'm sure the Senate will be picking this issue up as well. They have their own finance committee that needs to be talking about this. And in time, there's going to be regulations coming, which is another thing that can impact these investments. So we have to pay attention to that. And you want to pay attention to it because you want at times to be able to talk to your congressman and or senator. And believe me, you're probably going to be one of the few people that are addressing with some knowledge the issues of cryptocurrencies and all. So your voice could carry more weight. All right, folks, I think I'll just close there. Thanks for joining us always. Leave me your comments, and I enjoy reading them. And we'll see you again very soon.